Good afternoon. We'll be reading chapters 19 and 20 today from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And just to recap, yesterday they were in the boat, the beautiful pink boat gliding down the chocolate river. And along the sides, they could see different doors and they had names on the doors for different storerooms where Mr. Wonka stored different supplies and things to make his treats. So, chapter 19 is called The Inventing Room, Everlasting Gobstoppers, and Hair Toffee. When Mr. Wonka shouted, "Stop the boat!" the Oompa Loompas jammed their oars into the river and backed water furiously. The boat stopped. The Oompa Loompas guided the boat alongside the red door. On the door it said, "Inventing Room, Private, Keep Out." Mr. Wonka took a key from his pocket, leaned over the side of the boat, and put the key in the keyhole. "This is the most important room in the entire factory," he said. "All my most secret new inventions are cooking and swimming in here. I'm sorry, and simmering in here, not swimming. All my newest inventions are cooking and simmering in here. Old Fickelgruber would give his front teeth to be allowed inside just for 3 minutes. So would Prodnose and Slugworth and all the other rotten chocolate makers. So that's his competition. Those are the other people who would probably want to steal his ideas because Mr. Wonka has invented some really cool things that nobody else has. But now listen to me. I want no messing about when you go in. No touching, no meddling, and no tasting. Is that agreed? Yes, yes, the children cried. We won't touch a thing. Up to now, Mr. Wonka said nobody else, not even an Oompa Loompa, has ever been allowed in here. He opened the door and stepped out of the boat into the room. The four children and their parents all scrambled after him. "Don't touch," shouted Mr. Wonka, "and don't knock anything over." Charlie Bucket stared around the gigantic room in which he now found himself. The place was like a witch's kitchen. All about him, black metal pots were boiling and bubbling on huge stoves, and kettles were hissing, and pans were sizzling, and strange iron machines were clanking and spluttering, and there were pipes running all over the ceiling and walls, and the whole place was filled with smoke. Here is a picture. The whole place was filled with smoke and steam and delicious, rich smells. Mr. Wonka himself had suddenly become even more excited than usual, and anyone could see that this was the room he loved best of all. He was hopping about among the saucepans and the machines like a child among his Christmas presents, not knowing which thing to look at first. He lifted the lid from a huge pot and took a sniff. Then he rushed over and dipped a finger into a barrel of sticky yellow stuff and had a taste. Then he skipped across to one of the machines and turned half a dozen knobs this way and that. Then he peered anxiously through the glass door of a gigantic oven, rubbing his hands and cackling with delight at what he saw inside. Then he ran over to another machine, a small, shiny affair that kept going foot, 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 foot. And every time it went foot, 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 a large green marble dropped out of it into a basket on the floor. At least it looked like marble. "Everlasting gobstoppers," cried Mr. Wonka proudly. "They're completely new. I'm inventing them for children who are given very little pocket money. You can put one everlasting gobstopper in your mouth, and you can suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it and suck it, and it will never, never get any smaller." Wow, this would be something that Charlie would like. "It's like gum," cried Violet Beauregard. "It's not like gum," Mr. Wonka said. "Gum is for chewing, and if you tried chewing one of these gobstoppers here, you'd break your teeth off. But they taste terrific, and they change color once a week, and they never get any smaller. They never disappear. Never, lest I don't think they do. There's one of them being tested this very moment in the testing room next door. An Oompa Loompa is sucking it. He's been sucking it for very nearly a year. Sorry, guys. He's been sucking it for very nearly a year now without stopping, and it's still just as good as ever. Now over here," Mr. Wonka went on, skipping excitedly across the room to the to the opposite wall. Over here, I'm inventing a completely new line in toffees. He stopped beside a large saucepan. The saucepan was full of a thick, gooey, purplish, boiling and bubbling. But standing on his toes, little Charlie could just see it. "That's hair toffee!" cried Mr. Wonka. "You eat just one tiny bit of that, and in exactly half an hour a brand new, luscious, thick, silky, beautiful crop of hair will start growing out all over the top of your head, and a mustache, and a beard." "A beard!" cried Veruca Salt. "Who wants a beard, for heaven's sake?" "It would suit you very well," said Mr. Wonka, "but unfortunately the mixture is not quite right yet. I've got it too strong. It works too well. I tried it on an Oompa Loompa yesterday in the testing room, and immediately a huge beard started shooting out of his chin, and the beard grew so fast that soon it was trailing all over the floor in a thick, hairy carpet. It was growing faster than we could cut it. In the end, we had to use a lawnmower to keep it in check. But I'll get the mixture right soon, and when I do, then there will be no excuse any more for little boys and girls going about with bald heads." "But Mr. Wonka," said Mike Teavee, "little boys and girls never do go about with—" "Don't argue, my dear child, please don't argue," cried Mr. Wonka. "It's such a waste of precious time. Now over here, if you will all step this way, I will show you something that I am terribly proud of. Oh, do be careful. Don't knock anything over. Stand back." And here is the picture of the Oompa Loompa with all the hair growing. Okay, that's the end of chapter 19. Let's read chapter 20, The Giant Gum Machine. I bet Violet Beauregard's going to like this. Mr. Wonka led the party over to a gigantic machine that stood in the very center of the inventing room. It was a mountain of gleaming metal that towered high above the children and their parents. Out of the very top of it, there sprouted hundreds and hundreds of thin glass tubes, and the glass tubes all curled downwards and came together in a bunch and hung suspended over an enormous round tub as big as a bath. "Here we go!" cried Mr. Wonka, and he pressed 3 different buttons on the side of the machine. A second later, a mighty rumbling sound came from inside it, and the whole machine began to shake most frighteningly, and steam began hissing out of it all over, and then suddenly the watchers noticed that runny stuff was pouring down the insides of all the hundreds of little glass tubes and squirting out into the great tub below. And in every single tube, the runny stuff was of a different color, so that all the colors of the rainbow, and many others as well, came sloshing and splashing into the tub. It was a lovely sight. And when the tub was nearly full, Mr. Wonka pressed another button, and immediately the runny stuff stopped running out of the tubes. The rumbling sound disappeared, and the wheezing, whirring noise took its place, and then a giant whizzer started whizzing round inside the enormous tube, mixing up all the different colored liquids, like an ice cream soda. Gradually, the mixtures began to froth. It became frothier and frothier, and it turned from blue to white to green and brown to yellow, then back to blue again. "Watch," said Mr. Wonka. Click, click went the machine, and the whizzer stopped whizzing. And now there came a sort of sucking noise, and very quickly all the blue frothy mixture in the huge basin was sucked back into the stomach of the machine. There was a moment of silence. Then a few weird rumblings were heard. Then silence again. Then suddenly the machine let out a monstrous, mighty groan, and at the same moment a tiny drawer, no bigger than the drawer in a slot machine, popped out of the side of the machine, and in the drawer there lay something too small and thin and gray that everyone thought it must be a mistake. The thing looked like a little strip of gray cardboard. The children and their parents stared. There's a picture of the machine. So all those beautiful colors, now it comes out gray. I'm sure they are wondering. The children and their parents stared at the strip lying in the drawer. "You mean that's all?" said Mike Teavee, disgusted. "That's all?" answered Mr. Wonka, gazing proudly at the result. "Don't you know what it is?" There was a pause. Then suddenly Violet Beauregard, the goofy gum-chewing girl, let out a yell of excitement. By gum, it's gum, she shrieked. It's a stick of chewing gum. Right you are, cried Mr. Wonka, slapping Violet hard on the back. It's a stick of gum. It's a stick of the most amazing and fabulous and sensational gum in the world. All right, that's the end of chapter 20. So tune in tomorrow and we will pick up with chapter 21. Have a great afternoon, guys.